All right, are you going to live? Hi, everybody. We've got one man here who's going to push my live. Yes, good man. Excellent work. Welcome to SpeakuP Monday here at Tropical Nomad. Today we're out underneath the stars.
Yes, it's beautiful.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love being outside. It's just a great energy, and it's an auspicious day. The 21st is some once-in-a-millennia occasion.
The Christmas star.
Right.
I haven't seen it yet.
So this thing's coming down. So every Monday we're here at Tropical Nomad, either outside in the garden or inside in the podcast studio. So tonight we have Karlie Cummins from Bali Buddies. Welcome, Karlie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Cool. And look, so let's get this started. You're not obviously, but if you'd like to tell us where you're from in Australia.
In Australia.
Australia.
So I'm a Queenslander. So from Queensland, and started Bali Buddies 8 years ago from Queensland, and then my family and I moved over full time 4 years ago.
Got it. And so, if I asked you, and because I know you, let's go into the deep questions. Straight in. So, like, if you had a mission in life, right? What would that mission be?
Oh, I think my mission is always just to be happy and do what feels right for me. Always be kind, be nice, and just do what feels right. I think I'm always like, I'm an adaptable person to change. So if something's not feeling right, I can easily change to take another path, which is what I did.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in a minute. So what we love to do as well is to get a really good insight into you, right? Into kind of what makes you tick, where the ticking came from in the first place, right? So the people here watching at home, have an idea of like, maybe they'll see something similar in you that they do themselves. Maybe it will give them a bit of a inspiration to get moving, right? Or for those already moving, it might give them an inspiration to maybe pivot into a different direction, right? So I noticed that with your story, you had an enormous pivot, which was amazing. So can you maybe tell us about that, and then we'll go back afterwards?
Right. So there's been quite a few pivots, but my background is I grew up in central Queensland, moved to northern Queensland, and went to university to become a teacher because it's all I ever wanted to be from a little girl. And I did become a teacher and went on to teach, and quickly moved into what's called curriculum coordinating. So that was like working with the staff of teachers at the school I was at to help do their planning. And that was, I still love to teach, but it was a really good career. But when Facebook started becoming popular for businesses, and actually they opened up the pages, you could make a Facebook page. We've always been really avid travelers to Bali, like many Aussies, and we used to stay a lot in private villas. And at the time, the big travel agencies, the Flight Centres and Harvey Worlds and things, didn't really cover a lot of the private villas because there was not enough availability for them. If it was just one villa in Seminyak, they wouldn't cover it. So we had a lot of people always asking us for advice on, where can we stay? What do we do? So I, after a trip with one of my a group of mum friends, we came over to Bali, and they were like, it was so good to have everything planned for us. You should share your tips. So I just thought, I'll share my tips on a Facebook page, because it was all new. And I started sharing the tips on the Facebook page, and, within about 2 weeks, I had all these inquiries about people wanting me to help with their Bali holidays. And I was like, okay. So I thought I was being really clever, and messaged one of my friends, George, here in Bali, who has villas, and said, hey, George, if I can get some people to stay in your villa, do you think you could pay me a little bit of commission? Because I don't want it to cost my friends any more. But, if I'm going to spend time on it, I need to make money. And he was like, yeah, Karlie, that's what's called being a travel agent. I had never thought about how travel agents made their money. And I was like, okay. So, into Google, how to become a travel agent. And at the time in Australia, it had just become like a deregulated industry. So you actually just needed a business number, and you could call yourself a travel agent. So I delved into the world of being a travel agent, and quite quickly people started wanting things like travel insurance and flights and this and that. And so then I actually brought in someone who knew what they were doing to help me run a travel agency, and that solely was what Bali Buddies was for the first couple of years, was a travel agency. And then as our social platforms and our website really started to grow, I started getting these emails from businesses saying, oh, can we have your rate card?
What's that?
Yeah. Had no idea what a rate card was. Googled, what is a rate card? Oh, they want to do advertising with me. And then I was like, what do you even charge for advertising? So then I, made a fake email address and emailed a few what would now be my competitors and said, hey, I'm opening a shop in Canggu. Can I have your rate card?
Love it.
And that was the journey of how we started to become a marketing business. Was from there.
Yeah, and then so like you've gone from teacher into travel and then into like a business as like a travel agent, right? So there's a few pivots in there. And then if I would ask you, because you see, I believe that being a teacher isn't something that you aspire to do in a sense. It's in a way you're kind of chosen to do it, right? Because it's to me, teachers are the most important people on the planet, right? Because it's the next generation. It's what we believe, what we think, what we come to know, how we behave, and what we become, right? So they're very, very powerful thing to actually be. But if we are going on this line of like teachers are kind of made, right? You're made as a teacher. So what would you say in your background, in your childhood, was leading you towards becoming a teacher or a person in service of others?
I think that's a good question. I think it was my affinity with kids. I could always or crowds, I was always the one that was chosen to speak for the class because I was always leading and speaking, or I was emceeing a million events or so many weddings. I think it was, it's more that a communication probably that led me to the teaching rather than the teaching itself, because I find now, I go straight into teacher mode with my interns, right? At any time I have 2 or 3 interns with me and I get my teaching fix from working with them, because I guess I'm a sharer. I love to share. So I'm always sharing my knowledge or sharing my, I can't even help it, even if I'm going into we were in the Gillies last week, and it's so quiet, and it was having a break in the Gillies, and, but I couldn't help but sit down with the manager, and I was like, come on, you need to do this, put this on, this is how you'll get to these people, this is how you'll market to them. Yeah. So I think it's that sharing thing.
That sharing. So then of your parents, were there any, like your mum, your dad, like was one of them more of a sharer? How did that dynamic work, and brothers and sisters? And
so I've got 2 older brothers and 1 younger sister, but we always laugh because I'm always the one everybody comes to when there's the issue, right? You know how it says that's it's a bit harder now. I'm in Bali, but it's always go to Karlie. What's Karlie will fix that. But no, my dad was he was a leader in that way. He was in many, he always helped in many different ways on top of his paying job. So I think the most of that comes from him.
And were there any tough times when you're growing up, that you saw your parents go through that left some kind of lasting impression on you?
I think that the toughest time was when I was 21, when my dad died. I'd only just started my teaching career, and that was because he was the leader of our family. So I think that was kind of definitely the toughest thing.
Because you strike me as a person who is very, you're a woman of substance, right? What I call a woman of substance. What do I mean by that? It's a person who has a core, right? Who is resilient to the fore. So I get the sense with you, if I would drop you on a desert island, right? There are people who would end up broken. Oh, I can't do this, right? And then others who would just say, right, we're on a desert island, all right? I'm not going to get rescued anytime soon. What do I need? What can I do to survive, right?
Yeah.
You strike me as that person.
Yeah.
So where did that come from, do you think?
I guess it had to come from my parents, right? That they always knew how. It was probably in my bloodline. Even my mother's, grandfather, he was an Italian, and got drafted into the war. And then when he died, when she was young, and then my grandmother on my mum's side was very much a woman of substance. She had 5 kids and just picked up and started a business and ended up investing in things. So I guess it's probably generational. I also think, I think growing up quite, the word privilege gets thrown around. Not that we were a rich family, but we were very middle class. Like, we went on holidays. We never had to worry about anything. I think that sometimes then gives you... It can work in both ways. It can give you a level of comfort where you're just like, oh, well, everything comes easily. Or it can give you that ability to really try different things, or, become pragmatic or try and help people. And I think maybe that's the path I took.
See, what really interests me is that in your family, as you mentioned, right, you're the go-to, but you've got two brothers, right? So there's not, so the generational thing I get, but I
Why
don't
me?
get.
Why?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, right. Because so
Yeah.
you're all brought up, and obviously being a parent, you're a parent, I'm a parent. My eldest daughter is very different to my younger one, right?
Yeah.
And even though it's the same parents, but we were going through different things at different times.
Yep.
That perhaps was then taken on board by our eldest one, who's a little bit more feeling based, a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more empathetic, or apathetic, depending, and a younger one just doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right? She's like, I want this, I'm doing it, I'm doing it, right? She's very determined, and we'll just do it, right? So in some ways, the thing that our parents are going through at the time determine what gets, I guess, passed on to us. So the bit which I'm interested in is that, being that there's four of you,
Yep.
right, and there are two before you and one after you, so why are you the go-to?
Why am I the go-to? Yeah, I don't know. I guess I was always probably the most organised and vocal. And I probably had the strictest, even though I'm the third in line, I had the strictest upbringing because there was two boys, before me. So they were kind of a lot more leeway than me. And then I was the first girl after two boys, and I had to probably really fight for my rights with my family. I always remember when I had my boyfriend at I think I was like 19 or 19. I must have been 19, and I was coming home from uni, and Mum was like, "Oh, you have to sleep in two separate rooms." And I was like, "But Troy gets to sleep with his girlfriend in his room, and she's the same age, and you're a girl." And I was like, "It doesn't matter, equal rights." And got my way. But yeah, I guess maybe that was it, or I don't know if it's sometimes just born into you, because my two girls are very different. Yeah. Very, very different also, and they've been brought up in a, same parents and the same way. So maybe sometimes it's just something inside you that you're born with as well.
And thank you for that, darling. And if I say, the word or the words, equal rights for women, what comes up for you? What?
For me, it's just being able to, with equal rights, I feel like sometimes it's almost gone the other way now, where it's like you got to have equal rights for men as well, right? It's got to play both ways. But I just think everybody should have equal opportunities, and that's not just a women thing. I think that's a race thing. I think it's a wealth thing. I think everybody should have the same opportunities. Because, we all have something different to bring to the table.
Yeah. And you know what? This brings me into something which I love about you, which I'm not sure if I've ever told you. But hey.
About to find out.
No better time than this, right? So just, and I'm getting more of a picture of you, right? And I think people here as well are getting that also. But it's this thing about equality and unity, and people deserving a fair go, right? And people having the opportunity to do things, okay? So with Bali Buddies and you at the helm, and I've been around you a few times now, and we did a great little talk at Bali NGO and Associates the other day, but to seeing you in different contexts, I really get the sense that you believe that to be true. So obviously this is about Destination Indonesia Series, right? So this is about Indonesia and the people in it. Most of our guests are Indonesian at this point, and obviously you're not. But the reason why you're on the show is because I think that you are a huge champion when it comes to human rights.
Yeah.
And where I see Bali Buddies is playing more and more of a role, right, in that area. And I remember, we spoke a little bit about, we won't mention the TV channel, but I know everyone knows about it. But you did a cross for a particular TV channel in a particular country that's not so far away. And this country seems to have an agenda against Bali, right? And every picture that we see is a picture that's putting it down in some way, shape, or form. And I love your response to, how your story was interpreted from the producer and what they put out and why you're so upset and angry, about the way they did that. So for me, when it comes to this unity and it's giving everyone a fair go, and like showing the best parts of people that there's hope, I love about you, right? So when I say that about hope and about that thing that I love about you so much, what comes up for you?
Yeah, I guess it goes back to the age-old glass half full or half empty, and I've always been a half full. Even in the worst times of my life, it's always been exactly like you said about the desert island. Like, there's no point, dwelling on it. What are we going to do? This is where we're at. What are we going to do? What comes next? And where do we find their way out? And I think that kind of mindset is really important. So yeah, when things are portrayed in an untrue way or manipulated, the message. Deliberately, that was upsetting for me, not because of how I was portrayed, because that part I wasn't worried about. It's then the flow-on effect when you put people in a different mindset, and media is still so powerful in whichever way you absorb it, whether you absorb it like this, or whether you absorb it on social media, or whether you're still watching TVs and reading magazines and reading newspapers. It's very powerful. I mean, look at the way we're living life here in Bali. COVID's happening. We're wearing our masks outside, we're doing all of that. But nobody is walking around really, really scared, And then I have a look at other countries where it's more, people are still really, really scared. Or then you have things happening in Europe where it is out of control and maybe they're not scared. But it's the messages that people are getting really affect the way you live your life every day. So when it's a deliberately untrue message being portrayed, then that's when it takes a lot to upset me. But when it's something that's deliberately manipulated and untrue, and then it has harmful effects for businesses and people, that's when I get upset.
Thank you for that. And when it comes to media, as you brought it up, and media's responsibility to us, right, as a nation, and all the rest of that, like, so what would you say to somebody who maybe is at home and they're still digesting mainstream media, and they believe that mainstream media is true and everything that's said on there is true, is there a guide or like top 3 tips? Karlie's top 3 tips for digesting media in any country.
I think don't take too much of it in. I think this day and age, it's easy to go down a rabbit hole, right? And it's easy, whether that rabbit hole is reading everything mainstream or reading everything conspiracy, like, it's easy to go down a rabbit hole. I think it's always important to seek out all sides of an issue, because I think if anything that's been shown this year is that media or big issues is polarizing us in a way that it never has before. It's really like it's us and it's them, whereas I think you're better off looking at all and be tolerant of other people's opinions. So back to what you were saying, I think you need to look at all different forms of media, because there are agendas, and that's probably something even for me now as a media business. I've had to say no to some really lucrative deals because personally I didn't agree with what was being sold, right? It would be easy for me to say, I'll take the money and I'll publish that, but I don't really believe it. But that was never, that was never my plan. I could never live with myself to do that. So, but being in this industry now, I can see how that happens. Somebody wants you to put out a message and they're luring you with money. It's easy to just say yes. So it does take a lot of, that's why I've always kept Bali Buddies very small. and so that I can always make those decisions, and it's not a bottom line decision like where I have to sell my soul to, take the big check.
And just to put this in perspective, so I think you mentioned to me one of the articles you had on your Facebook page had how many million hits or views?
Oh yeah, we got up to like 1.8 million.
So what 1.8 million views, honey? I hate to be the one to break this to you. You're not really keeping it that small, right? 1.8 million views on one article. Come on.
As far as the company goes, we are very, very, very small, and that is a deliberate decision to stay small. So. Because on another topic of the work-life balance, for me, it's I don't want to be running a big, huge company and having that kind of pressure. I like the idea of having it small and being able to do what I believe in and do what I love, and then I don't mind working a lot because I love what I do.
Thank you. And it's easy for us to get into that headspace of tarnishing the media, downplaying the media, beating the media up. So if I asked you, what are some of the best things that media have done, and it could be in relation to Bali or somewhere else, but just what comes into your mind, maybe one or two cases that you think, what, that was well played, and I'm really glad that it happened.
Yeah, that's hard because I myself kind of switch off a little to mainstream media now, right? And probably have had some bad experience with close friends who have been really burnt by the mainstream. There are definitely, it's like any profession. There's journalists who do amazing jobs at investigative stories and people who have helped, kids in really horrible situations get out of that. There's lots of good that the media has definitely done, but like anything, people tend to focus on the bad. So even that channel we were talking about, their chief of their bureau chief rang me, and we were talking, and the saying of if it bleeds it leads. So those stories do sell, and sadly, as a human race, we seem to. It's like that car crash thing. You can't look away.
One of the things which I've loved about media as well is that now, with the phone that we're viewing some of this on, you have the power in your hand, right? So whereas before you would go back and you would have to digest your news from certain sources, now you have the opportunity to tune into people that you like, maybe people who you think are authentic, people that you believe are doing the right thing, right? Yeah. And I find that's incredibly powerful, right?
That's hugely powerful, and it's really been a challenge for the mainstream media to have to deal with that, because they used to be the channel that gave everybody their news, and now everybody's giving everybody their news, and we almost have the opposite problem, or we definitely have the opposite problem where there's too much news, and that's where you have to have that balance to know when to switch off. And in our family we talk about, you can know what's going on in the world, and we can worry about this and that, but at the end of the day, we have our little circle of what we can control here, and that's really where our main energies need to go into. We all want to fight for the greater good and make sure things are happening, but not at the detriment of your own mental health or your own, sleepless nights as well.
And moving forward on this to Indonesia, right? So you set up a company here, Bali Buddies, going really well. But you mentioned before about coming here from Australia, right? But which things did you fall in love with, and have those things changed?
It was interesting when we were talking about moving over here. We got all the, it's not going to be like it is when you're on holidays. It's not going to be the same. But I can safely say it's actually better. I think I always say that Bali either accepts you and opens and brings you in, or I'm sure you've all seen those people who come here and they get rejected by the island, not necessarily by the people, but by the vibes of the island. They just don't mesh with what's going on here. So the things I definitely love are the people, which is one of the reasons why I chose to live in Sanua, because I find that the locals and the Westerners there really live and work side by side. Like you see, just as many locals in the street every day as you do Westerners. So it's definitely the people. I am a strong believer in karma, which we all know is a big part of the Hindu religion. So that's definitely something that I loved. The warm weather. I'm not going to lie, I love the warm weather. And for me, getting off what I felt like I had no choice to do in Australia was that kind of run-of-the-mill rat race that it's like, wake up, have breakfast, get dressed, drop the kids at school, work, pick them up. It's gymnastics time. It's this, on the weekend, okay, we've got to go to sport, and then we've got to clean the house, and we've got to do this, and we've got to do that. That part of life is completely different living here, and everything's much slower and much calmer, and I chose a different schooling path for my kids when we come here, so that part we love even more because we find as a family. Business wise, I find Bali very collaborative, and I find that everybody has time to listen to your idea, which I don't find as easy in Australia. An example of that was, I was with my team and we were thinking, what other things can we work on? What can we do? And we were like, when Aussies come over here, back when that used to happen, when Aussies come over here, and they stay here for a couple of weeks, but they don't really know how to use like online transport here, or that you can get food deliveries and things like that. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do a deal with one of the online transport and food operators, and we do some work with them. We're sharing some really good info. It's a good partnership for us. And so the golden ticket in Bali is knowing someone's WhatsApp number, right? So you WhatsApp a few other people going, hey, do you have a WhatsApp for this? And I got a WhatsApp and said, hey, I'm Karlie from Bali Buddies. I've got an idea, and I'd really love to buy you a coffee so I can just tell you my idea. And we did that and had a coffee, and then we went on to have like this amazing campaign together from sending a WhatsApp and having a coffee. So it's a different way of business, whereas if I was trying to do that with Uber in Australia, could you imagine? I would never get to contact anyone, and the thought of going for coffee with me, they'd be like, time is money, lady, are you kidding? And they'd be like, what proof do you have that you can do us any good? So I find that whole atmosphere in Bali very, very, very different. People are always ready to listen. I find that even competitors work very well together. It's a very different working atmosphere here, which I really love because, like I said, being a teacher, it's kind of always in your blood to share and to help. And so that part I really love about working here.
Got it. Beautiful. And a few things come up for me about your story, right? So I get this incredibly strong, resilient core of you, and I get that possibly, right, being the first girl after the two boys, and you were treated a little bit differently, and you were like, hang on a second, I need to stand up for myself. And it's that same strength, right, that allows you also to fend off some of these approaches which in your heart of hearts this is not going to take us forward, right? Yeah. And it's like, no, when I say no means no. Yeah, right? And you're able to back that up, right? Which is incredible. So based upon that, in a way, so what has been maybe one of the toughest challenges that you've had here, and how did you think that you overcame it?
Oh, I always say that the toughest challenges here is, there's a language barrier. I do learn Indonesian, but I'm in no way fluent. but if you've done business here, you know it's very grey. It's not really quite black and white. So even when you're trying to do things as legally and as legitimately as possible, you still get a lot of these grey answers. And you're like, well, can I do that or can I not do that? And I think for me, the way to overcome that is to have met some very trusted Indonesian people who I can revert to and say, hey, can I do this or am I going to get thrown in jail? You know, that they can really interpret and talk straight to me, because when you talk business-wise or tax-wise or immigration-wise around here, it's very, very grey. A lot of the conversations are very grey and they're open to interpretation. But if you interpretate that wrong, you could find yourself, you know, in a spot of bother. So for me, it's been reaching out and making connections with people who I know I can really trust to give me the straight truth. And
how have you found those people?
I am a connector, Rob. Like I meet people at the grocery store. No, it is. It's just I meet people everywhere, and I guess I always say, so when we moved here, I decided to take the kids out of regular school because I was feeling like it wasn't serving them. So they still do regular school, but they did it online, you know, before Corona made it cool. So they were doing online school all the time. From their schools in Australia. So they wake up at 6 a.m. and they're live with their headsets and their videos back to Australia. But everybody's ultimate thing back then, before we've had online schooling for Corona, was like, oh, but what about the socialization of the kids? You know, like it's impossible to have a social life unless you go to school. And I said, yeah, of course, that was a consideration for us. But what it made me do when we move here is explicitly teach the kids how to make a friend. Now, in Australia, growing up, you don't get taught how to make a friend because you kind of get them automatically from school, and then you go into a job, and then you get them from your job, you know, whereas when we came here and the kids were online schooling, I had to teach them how to make a friend, and talk about, well, if you're at gymnastics and there's someone, you know, who you're gelling with and you like, you need to ask them questions like, who picks you up from gymnastics and which one is she? And, you know, then you need to say to me, Mum, I need you to come and meet Tammy's mum because I'd like to have a play date with Tammy. And so I guess I love that now they've been taught how to make a friend, because it's something that I've always done anyway. Like if I've struck up a conversation with someone at the beach, I'll be like, oh, let me get your WhatsApp number. And it's legitimately making that effort to go, well, if I want to see this person again and I want them to be my friend, I need to catch up with them again, like invite them for a coconut or invite them for a coffee. So I do that, but it's often for a wine as well.
Yeah, I got the wine.
Yeah, but that's how I've that's how I've gotten my connections, is really just from talking and listening. And you know, my husband met this guy in Vegas once, and he always talks about this guy saying, you know, he just said to me, never discount anyone who crosses your path. Like, never discount anyone, because that could be the person to change your life. You know, and I guess I always thought about that, and I thought it's so true, because you don't know, you could change their life or they could change your life. So you know, even during this time, you know, when those funny masks started coming out with the big smiles on them or the beards and stuff, so we bought some of those off Facebook, you know, because we thought it would make a funny photo. And the lady who came and dropped it off to me, Wayan, and I started chatting with her, you know, oh, what are you doing? What did you used to do before you sold these masks? And she was like, oh, I had like a baby equipment hire place. And she said, you know, it was going so well, but now we've got no customers. And she said, at first I was scared of COVID, so I stayed home, but then we were running out of money and I was scared of starving. So I thought, well, what does everybody need now? You know, they need masks. And I was like, yeah, that's, you know, it's really clever. And it's something that I've really admired about the Indonesians during this time, is they don't have the safety net of the Western world to get money from the government when things aren't going wrong. So they're really just the most entrepreneurial and intuitive people, where they just find something else to do that can be completely different from what they're doing. So, here we are standing with these masks, and we started talking about, well, why don't you? There's a couple of, pubs and things open. Why don't you go and try and sell 10 at a time instead of selling, like to me, 2 at a time? And I was like, here, here's a WhatsApp number of my friend who owns this restaurant, or here's that one. So in that way, I was helping her, but then there's been other times where I've met people and then they've turned around and they've helped me. So, I think I always like that one of never discount anyone that you meet.
That's such a beautiful thing to say, and it works so well. I remember, just running nightclubs for many years in Sydney and other places, and just being at the door, because that's, and everyone thinks you're the doorman, right?
You're the doorman.
We were running the night, but it didn't really matter. And so many times, I learned that so early on, and the amount of people that I connected with who had no idea who they were, because it wasn't based on how they were dressed, right? Some of the guys who dressed in Western terms of the worst were some of the most connected people that I've ever met. Probably because they don't feel the need to impress anybody, so just dress down wherever they go, right? Yeah. So that was quite interesting, But just again, it keeps on coming back again and again and again. Never judge a book by its cover.
Yes, definitely.
Never judge a book by its cover. So I really connect with that one. So look, for also the other thing that came up for me was that. So obviously this is Destination Indonesia Series, and one of the things which I've noticed through doing this particular series has been the strength, resilience, power, and intuitiveness of Indonesians, right? So we've obviously had in the last few weeks some incredibly powerful women. Last week we had Evie, from Sabah Bay, an incredible Indonesian success story, and it keeps coming back. I remember Christia was amazing. Rob Almont and his partner Miriam. Then we had the girls from Bali Staff Solutions, one German, Sunya, and the other one in Indonesia, which is Radnya, right? But incredibly powerful women. But then also people like why you always get stuck on his name, Wahyu, incredibly gifted, intelligent, smart, one of the most complete people I've ever met or had the fortune to interview, and he's 30 years of age and is really powerfully empowering his country, right, to be better, to be the next step, the better version of themselves, right? So that's been fascinating for me. And so you mentioned before about, you've met some incredible people here. Is there anyone that sticks in your mind, any Indonesian people that you've met and you thought, my God, that's a really impressive person?
Honestly, so many that it would almost be unfair to single out one. But it just reminded me then when you were talking about that the TV show we were talking about, my pitch to them as what I agreed to do the story on was I wanted them to highlight how individuals and businesses in Indonesia had so cleverly adapted without any support or very minimal government support. Because I find what I've really learnt from the Indonesian people is when you don't have that safety net or that backup, all ego or pride goes out the window. Like, I can't do that. That's not my job. It's been about survival. And some of these, like, when COVID first started and we were trying not to go out, some people who used to be drivers started up this fruit and vegetable service, right? And they're like, just WhatsApp us what you want from the market and we'll pick it up and we'll drop it off to you. And they've gone on to be so hugely successful. And what I found interesting about that is something that happened because of COVID, but now I will never change because they get way better produce than I ever did. It's actually cheaper than I could get it because if I'd go to the market, I always paid the bulle price, and it gets dropped off to my door. So here's something that didn't exist before COVID, now is a thriving business and something that won't change later on when things go back to normal. So that kind of thing to me is like incredibly powerful to see that. And even the businesses, I think, have been there's been so many clever business initiatives to be able to stay open and keep some cash coming in. And a lot of that has been collaborations as well, where we've seen, the pottery people come into the restaurant and you have a meal and you build a pot or paint or whatever it is. That on a whole, I think, is really just so inspiring, and it's something that I definitely didn't see when I was in Australia. Not to the degree of what you see. Of course, there's resilient people and clever people, but not to the degree of when you see it as a whole here. Yeah. So I always think, I have so much to learn from when you come from always having a safety net. And you see people who don't. I think you really learn when people are like, no, I have to swing into action and I have to do something different.
And I agree entirely with you, right? So this collaborative energy that you find here in Indonesia, I'm like you, I love connecting people with ideas and projects which uplift humanity, right? In some way, shape or form, that has to be in there, wired into the DNA. And as I think I said, I know, every week it comes in. It's like a jigsaw puzzle of life, right? So this is a jigsaw puzzle that we're all creating, this beautiful tapestry. And each of us has a piece of this jigsaw puzzle, right? And the three things that we must have is that one is that, we do what we do best. Right, your resilience, your media, you're killing the game, right? We do what we do best. Number two is that we don't keep it to ourselves. So we have the ability to trust ourselves and to trust others, right? And then the third thing is that it's something which uplifts humanity in some way, shape or form, right? Okay, so in here I find that the people that I bump into now are incredibly aligned, right, to that direction. So now just pick up on something you said earlier on about the way that people here have pivoted and have moved their model to create things that weren't there before, and now we had Janur the other week who's done the Bali plastic exchange, right, which is where you exchange plastic and non or inorganic materials for rice. Right, and there's a business model in there that gives Indonesian people back their dignity as well as being able to live and breathe and all the rest of that. So for you personally, as Bali Buddies, right? So now you were prior to COVID heavily dependent upon your advertisers, sponsors, let's call them that, paying you money to advertise their products to a great market here and overseas.
Yep.
Okay, so now since travel has diminished somewhat, firstly, how did COVID initially affect your business, and then what did you do to overcome it or to pivot?
So technically I still have two businesses. So I had the travel agency, which is an Australian-based business, and then I have the media company in Bali. So the travel-based business, for the first couple of months was a nightmare because it was refunds and trying to change dates and everything like that. So that had to get taken care of first. So that got taken care of so that we could, get everyone their money back or make it fair at least on all parties, because we're the agents in the middle there. The media business, of course, we lost nearly all revenue instantly because businesses closed down, and there's no way I was going to hold anyone to a contract, to an advertising contract, when something like this happened, right? It just doesn't even make sense that you would try and do that. So I then had to go back to school and learn other ways of if I want to keep this business still going, how else can I monetize it? And so I did a couple of different online courses about monetizing websites, and we kind of went down a track where moving forward, our revenue won't be totally dependent on advertising dollars. We went a lot into affiliate linking. We've done some ad placements on our website, but things that I felt comfortable that it didn't change our product and what we were giving, and that we always say we are a guide to all things Bali, whether it be luxury or budget. We love to share it all because I love sitting on the beach and having a 20k mie goreng as much as I love being at Raffles and having a beautiful brunch. So I didn't want it to change our product, and I didn't want it to impact the user too much. So yeah, we'd all love to have no ads on websites anywhere, but we tried to place them in places where they're at least intrusive as possible. But that allowed us different revenue streams to keep coming in during this time, to be able to keep us open.
Got it. And you know, it's interesting because I have another friend we spoke about, we won't mention his name, but another guy who's created an incredible network, much like yourself, and is very understanding of the pros and the cons and all the this wonderful mixture chemistry that makes Bali. And then what he's ended up doing with that is that people have contacted him because at the moment, you know, there's a big understanding physically, you know, of what's going on around the world. And it's this wonderful thing we watch on YouTube, which is a guy or different people in that country or city walking around with a camera for 2 or 3 hours, walking around the city, and you get to see what's happening right now. It's really amazing. So with Bali, people are realizing that this place is absolutely beautiful. And so what he's done is that, you know, people have reached out to him to find buildings to buy, or, you know, hotels to either purchase or to look into, or different real estate acquisitions that they probably weren't looking at before because they're realizing, well, after this thing moves or shifts in a different way, then there's a possibility for us to actually, you know, do something of value, use it as a retreat for co-workers, right? To use it as a remote working place, because ultimately, if now we've seen that we don't need to be flying around the world to have meetings and we can work remotely, then where is it in the world that I would like to work remotely from? And obviously Bali is coming up pretty strongly in that list. So that's been quite interesting. But have you heard any other stories of, you know, other people which have pivoted or used their je ne sais quoi in a different way?
To pivot their business, you mean? So specific examples. It's always hard when you put on the spot for specific examples. But just on that topic, you're talking about Bali coming up. I think I was telling you the other week that I wrote an article. I did an interview and did an article on what we're calling the tempat. Do you remember me saying that to you? That I do think that moving forward, we're going to see the rise of the temporary expat. So maybe not just a digital nomad like you know you guys are that are, you know, nomading around, but actually because COVID has forced us to work online and school online, things that a lot of people may have never thought they could do, especially the schooling online. You know, a lot of parents would be, no, we can't do that, but they've done it. Some people have hated it, but some people have really loved it. So I do think that post-COVID, not just for Bali, but for other destinations as well, we will see the rise of the tempat, like the temporary expat, not people who like you or and I who are over here and the roots are in and we're probably not going anywhere for a long time, but people who are coming for 1 or 2 years rather than the 1 or 2 week holiday. They're going to come and they're going to have their gap years, or their tempat experience. So I do think that we will see a lot of that happening, which will pivot the way that people market to those people. And it's already we see immigration having to pivot because we all know they're discussing the digital nomad visa now at the moment, right? Because that's a result of what is happening in the world. So I think what I think are going to be big trends moving forward is definitely people taking time out from their regular life on a bigger basis than just 2 weeks holiday. And I definitely think we'll see visas changing around the world because as a country, well, as Bali, why wouldn't we want more tempats here? Because they're making money in another country and they're spending it in the businesses here. So to me, it's as that's only enhancing the jobs for local people, not taking it away. So I think we're going to see that be a big trend, and I also think we're going to see alternate forms of schooling now that people have been exposed to different types of schooling. I think if I was still in the teaching game, I would be setting up an online school right now.
Yeah, online school.
Yeah.
And look, it would be remiss of me. And by the way, if you've got any questions out there, let us know that the time is coming pretty soon. So it would be remiss of me, as you mentioned, schooling, right? So you have 2 kids. So maybe there's people here who are watching this wondering, well, you know what? I've got 2 kids or 1 kid or maybe more kids, and I'm thinking about Bali. I've heard about it. It looks great, right? What are some of the things that I should keep in mind if I'm thinking about moving to Bali, either short-term or long-term, and I have kids, say, under the age of 10?
So your biggest things when you're moving to Bali are firstly, what visa are you coming in on? What you're going to do for money, because, you know, I'm sure you get the question all the time, you know, what jobs are there for me in Bali? And as a foreigner, there's really not many, unless you're creating your own or you're making your money some other way through your investments or online or whatever. So it's what you're going to do for money. It's insurance. You know, I still cringe when I know that people don't have insurance here, because it is a big issue. And, you know, even for us at the moment, we're having to redo our insurance because what we were on before is not covered anymore. And that's probably one of the big headaches of being here, is your health insurance. But being comfortable with the schooling decision. I think when it comes to education, we're just coming to a time now where our ideals of, you know, for me, schooling hasn't changed. In hundreds of years, the rest of the world has changed. But school is kind of still the same. You know, you're still in a classroom, you're still at desks, you know, you might have a computer now and you're still putting your hand up in it. And the rest of the world has changed dramatically. And when you talk about things falling into place, you know, when we decided to move over here, it was because I was starting to doubt the school system for my kids. I felt like there was a lot of wasted time, and they were kind of like on this wheel of school was life, and school said when we could go on holidays, and school said when we could do this. So it was a big factor in choosing to move over here, was to get off that schooling wheel, and we went on to the online schooling. And when we started it and we felt the freedom of it, and we felt we saw how well our kids were still doing, and they still had friends, and you know, school was over for them by 10 or 12 o'clock. It is over for them between 10 and 12 o'clock every day. And then I say the real learning starts, you know, when they go out and they're doing their other things. You know, sometimes they've done school from a hotel in Singapore, and sometimes they've done it from, you know, an airport or wherever. I always said back then, I said, I bet to my teaching friends, you know, I bet within 10 years we're going to see, I reckon we'll see like 50% of kids schooling like this. You know, it just makes sense that they're like their own little digital nomads. And then Corona came and it was like 100% of kids doing it. But I do think that we are going to see that change in schooling. I think COVID has pushed it forward to when it was going to happen. I think it's pushed it forwards because it's opened up people's minds now. You know, here yourself, people who are going to international schools and it's all online and they're paying a fortune. So many of them have pulled them out of the schools because they're like, well, I can't pay you $250 million a year for my kid to be at my own house on their computer doing work, you know. Not the school's fault, but it's opening up parents' minds now to different types of education, and that in fact their kids are still functioning just as well as they were, and they're still learning and they're still progressing forward. So I do think that COVID's going to have a huge impact on how we educate our children, because as adults our education has completely changed. Universities are almost completely online now for some courses, and you know, if you and I want to learn something, we jump on a YouTube course or you know, a digital course. So I do think we are going to see that trend come through, which then back to your original question about, you know, bringing your kids over, you have to be comfortable of how you're, you know, how you want to educate them. You might choose to unschool them. There's lots of people who do that here as well.
And then look, so we'll just come to a few questions after this. So just coming back now to yourself, your business marketing. So we're now in Indonesia. You've been here for some time. You know, is there anything? So 2 parts to this question. The first one is there anything you would have done differently in terms of that marketing business, Bali Buddies, and the future of Bali Buddies? Where do you think it's heading?
So that's a good question. Like, would I do anything different? Because of kind of a course, because if I had to set up some of these things like 10 years ago, I would be, Skyping you from my Maldives suite at the moment. But no, I love it. I love that I've learned as I've gone along the way. So I don't even know where Bali Buddies will be in 10 years' time, because it's been going for 8 years. And when it started, I didn't know it was going to be a travel agency. And when it was a travel agency, I didn't know it was going to be a digital media business. So I don't know, but that's what I love, is that I don't know. What I plan to do is just keep doing what I'm doing and learning and changing and adapting. We live in a very changing world, and if someone had said the word affiliate link to you even 3-4 years ago, no one would know what you're talking about, and still lots of people don't now. So if you don't worry. So I think always keeping up to date with what's new and how can that help me deliver our product better, and hopefully still just enjoying the life on the island, which I do.
Got it. Beautiful. Thank you, darling. So now, any questions, guys, put your hands up. We'll get a microphone to you. And just want to say, remember, if you're just joining us, we're here at Tropical Nomad, SpeakuP Monday, every Monday, 7 p.m. till 8 o'clock or 8 something. So feel free to join us. We have a studio audience as well as online through Instagram, YouTube, Facebook Live. We have a Facebook group called not Turn Your Story into a Book. That's another one. SpeakuP Monday group. SpeakuP Monday group. And yeah, look, Turn Your Story into a Book. That's another one. Feel free to join that one too. All right. So let's go to a question, Brother Kadar.
So it's really interesting to learn from an expat. Who comes to an Asian, part of the world. And also the other way around. There are these culture shocks, right? It's really interesting and funny. So what were some of your culture shocks when you first came to Bali?
The culture shocks, I think, a lot of them come to do with your house and running out of credit for your electricity in the middle of the night, and you're like, what is that, and how do I fix that? Yeah. When rating season come, having to run around and look at your roof to find the leaks. So a lot of those house culture shocks are probably things that don't happen. They didn't happen so much in Australia, as they're just like Bali things that you get used to here. The directness, you've got to love the Indonesians for directness. So if you've put on weight, they love to tell you. If you look tired, they love to tell you. Also, if you look good, they love to tell you. But, it's like, oh, you eat a lot on your holiday, you're fat now. Or, oh, look at your eyes, you're tired. Why are you so tired? There's no sugarcoating anything here. So you have to have a thick skin in Indonesia if you're not used to that direct, that directness there. So that's always quite funny, and we always have a good giggle about that. But I think if you were very if you were very sensitive in that way, that may be a very big culture shock for you when you start hanging out with the locals. What are other culture shocks? I think always I hate dealing with anything with banks back in Australia and things like that, because none of them use online. You have to use a phone, and who uses the actual phone lines anymore? No one here. So that's always a culture shock, to get back and get into that. And something funny that I really found here was there is literally no working hours, right? There's no working hours. So I remember in my first year living here, I got a phone call at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. A WhatsApp call, of course, because it wasn't on the phone. And it was a tourism board inviting me on a familiarization trip to another part of Indonesia. I thought I was being punked, right? It's 10 o'clock on a Friday night. I'd just gotten back from the Sanur Festival. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come there. Yeah, send me the invitation. Well, lo and behold, 9 o'clock the next day, I had the official, invitation turn up, and I was like, oh, no, that they were for real. And I've agreed to go on this trip now, and I did, and it was great. But it's the no working hours. It can be like sometimes I've had people message me at 1:00 in the morning and go like, oh, I would really like to advertise my product with you. So knowing when to turn your WhatsApp notifications off, I think is something you need to learn when you're in Indonesia, especially. But I think, and then also the time thing, that it's just so ingrained into me. I can't be late. Even if I try to be late to something, I cannot be late. But everyone's always late here.
Oh, yeah, guilty as charged. Not always late, but no, my partner would disagree. So for you, what do you think when it comes to mindset? So if you're coming here to Bali, what's a great mindset to have?
I think your mindset has to be that you're coming here to be of value. Because I think if you come here thinking, oh, I can open that and I can make a lot of money, or if you come with that as your intention, I don't think it works. I think if you come here and that I can add value in some way, and whether that's just by you're spending money here or you're making connections or you're helping other businesses, I think that goes a long way to, you're talking about before about the people who you attract. My favorite saying is your vibe attracts your tribe, and when you put those vibes out that you're being genuine and you are here to help and you are here to, because that's why we all come here, because we love the way of life here. So what I never like is people coming here and trying to then change something, well, back home we did it like this, and you're like, well, but you're here now and you're living here, so you came here for a reason. So I think if you come to add value, and you are accepting of everyone, I think that those kind of karmic vibes come back to you. It just seems to be that kind of circle, that circle in the island. You can either get caught up in a really toxic circle, or you can get caught up in like a really collaborative, nice circle where you've got people that will help you and that you can text and go, hey, I've got a problem, can you help me with this? It's a bit like looking at any Facebook group, right? And some of the groups you see nothing but vile attacks on anybody asking any question, and then other ones are really helpful, and they're there to help you with things. So I do believe in that your vibe attracts your tribe. So if you come here and you're here to add value and you're here to help, I think really good things can come from that.
Yeah.
Great. And then so last couple of questions. So one that comes up for me is that government, right? So we're here in Indonesia, and lots of people maybe are looking at Bali and thinking, well, yeah, but the government this, the government that, the government this, the government that. So I want to get your opinion in a second about the government. Before I say that, or before I ask you, one thing which I've noticed, which I really enjoy, is that when you take, so there's a company called Gojek here, similar to
Uber, Uber.
Yeah, similar.
Except it does way more than Uber. So there's Gojek and Grab, and you can get food, you can get things delivered, and I really find it hard to function when I go back to Australia without it.
Yeah, so it's a massive company. It's the first, one of the first decacorn, which I didn't even know was even a name. I mean, unicorn I struggled on. When someone said, hey, it's a unicorn company, I was looking for the horn. Huh? Unicorn, what the hell is that? And then someone said, Gojek's the first decacorn. I'm like, oh man, I was stuck on unicorn. I got no chance of figuring this one out. I had to ask somebody. But basically means it's a huge company, right? They did extremely well. And, so they took, the main co-founder, one of the co-founders of that, guy called Nadeem, took him out and then basically put him in the position of education minister for Indonesia that has over, 270 million people, right? So it's a very bold step. I haven't seen that type of step done anywhere else in the world, and I can think of anyway. And then meeting some of the people which I have done through doing this Destination Indonesia series, I see tremendous opportunities here going forward in the future. Also, While I think is why you were saying that it's one of the only countries where I think 70% of the population are under the age of productivity.
Yeah.
In other words, the next 10, 20 years, they've got a massive labor force that's there to be used, and they're very skillful with their hands and being able to put things together and all the rest of that. So obviously, there's pros and cons no matter what, right? And there's other sides of Indonesia that you could argue about as well. But for you, when I mention Indonesian government in the context of what you're doing, what kind of things come up for you?
So for me, the government is more the things that I'm doing. It's more just the legalities that go into setting up a foreign-owned company and making sure I'm paying the right tax here, because I still pay tax in Australia and things like that. So the government don't impact my work directly like that. It's more about just following government declarations. We know when we're speaking of that grey, we all saw the announcement last week that changed with the travel, and it was like we were in the Gili, and then it's like you need an antigen test to come back to Bali on the 18th. We're already in the Gili with our rapid test, and there's nowhere in Gilis to get an antigen test. So when governments make decisions like that, sometimes it is a little grey, and it's a bit like, well, we're just going to have to run the gauntlet here. And that comes with the relaxed lifestyle. We were like, look, we go to get on the boat. If we can't get on the boat, well, then we have to stay here until we can figure out where to get an antigen test, but we got back. Those types of things is probably how the government impact us more than really directly as a business. As a business, as long as we're working within our categories that we've set up our PMA in, and as long as you've got a good accountant helping you navigate all of that. The government doesn't impact us like that. It's more the rules for things like visas and staying on top of all of that and making sure when I have to release information, I want to make sure that it's really real, because a lot of people in the media game, it's all about clicks and likes and comments and shares now. So the quicker you can get out the breaking news, the more of that you get. But especially with the language barrier and then the way that Indonesia releases their announcements sometimes, it does take some time to make sure you've got it clear before you can send a very clear message that you want to say. So for me, it makes me probably double check my work 10 times if it's something breaking, like when the borders were closing or when the visas were changing. That's probably how government impacts me more, but not to a huge degree.
Got it. Thank you, darling. Thank you. So now, look, drawing to a close. In a minute, I'm going to ask you, if there's anything maybe left in your mind. It might be about people coming to Indonesia, coming to Bali, the fact that it's open. Might be something around that. It could be something else that maybe you wish. Hey, I haven't said this yet, and I'd love to say that to everybody here who's watching, whether you're watching on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or something else which I can't think of at the moment. So whichever way you're watching this, so you feel free to say that. Up until that point, I want to say that, so we're here every Monday here at Tropical Nomad. Today we're in the garden underneath the stars, which is beautiful, so you can come and join us as the in-studio audience. Next week we have Michelle, who is, she is the president of the Rotary Club here in Bali. Indonesian furious woman. I don't mean furious as in angry, furious, but powerful, strong woman with a great story. It moved me, her story, right? And I'm thinking that it's a great way to end the year with somebody who's intimately connected to the land and intimately connected to what's going on, what has happened in the last 10 months in a year, and how people in Bali are kind of coping with it and dealing with it and how they're moving forwards. So looking forward to that. That will be next week here at Tropical Nomad, 7 o'clock. Tune in. Feel free to share this. Sharing is caring, right? Next year, 2021, apparently that's going to be. There's some more amendments that we'll be doing, but SpeakuP Monday will be just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which is great. So thank you to Itchy and the guys here at Tropical Nomad for really, it's a great collaboration that we have, and we both love it, and it's a great thing, and it works really, really well. So, take a breath. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the beautiful Karlie Cummins from Bali Buddies. Thank you so much for being here and saying yes.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll leave it to you to wrap us up for this week.
Oh, well, I think the wrap up and the message, I guess, I would like to send away with people is it has been an incredibly tough year, but people have done amazing things here, both individually and on business levels. And I really hope that those businesses that have worked hard to support other businesses and to support their staff, that doesn't go unnoticed once we come back to being fully operational. I think everybody should be looking around at what's happening on the island now, who is supporting their staff, who is supporting other businesses, and I think it's shown in a lot of businesses and in a lot of staff groups. I guess the old true colours comes out when it comes down to a crisis like this, and I think that there are so many people to be commended on the way that they've pivoted and the way they've looked after others during this time. We can only hope that they are the people who are thriving on the other side of this, because they've kept Bali humming along during this time.
Thank you so much, Karlie. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas,
Happy
everybody.
New Year.
And thanks for being yourself. I love you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
All right, guys. See you soon.